Good morning, good morning. What a wonderful morning. Today I took this wonderful opportunity that I'm going to reflect on something peculiar that comes from the word of the Lord. Today I'm going to reflect from the book of Daniel, and the chapter will be chapter 6. And the first will be I'm going to cross examine chapter 6 and verse 1 to 28. The theme here is going to be how should we conduct ourselves in every affair that we undertake. Here we are going to see how one person, a prophet of God, conducted himself in his work of his undertaking. You can imagine this prophet, this great prophet Daniel, from background. He was a man who was taken to exile and is living in Babylon. And here what happened is that Daniel now has been appointed to be a supervisor, to supervise others in the great kingdom of Babylon. But there's one unique thing that exemplified his work. He did beyond and above, and even the king himself wanted to appoint him to be above all other supervisors of the entire kingdom. So imagine such a gravity. He had extraordinary abilities than anybody else. There's a question, how should we conduct ourselves in any affair in everyday life? Whether it will be your faith, in your church, how do you conduct yourself to do things extraordinarily so that others will receive your abilities? How do we conduct ourselves so that people will come and seek you because you have extraordinary abilities? Not only our religious faith, but our normal human being life. So this is what Daniel did. So we are going to really examine. Before I start, I will start with our prayer. Our Father, the Son, the Spirit. Amen. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass us. Lead us not into temptation. So, brethren, I encourage you to accompany me as I go through to read through this, and I pray that the power of the Holy Spirit may guide me and open the Word, that I may speak the Word in depth and in truth and in spirit. So let's read. And Darius the Mede succeeded in the kingdom at the age of 62. So that was the person who succeeded. And Darius decided to appoint over his entire kingdom 120 straps, staffs to safeguard his interests. These were accountable to three supervisors, one of whom was Daniel. You can imagine Daniel is appointed of these three supervisors to supervise all others to present the king's interest. Daniel outshone all the supervisors and subs because an extraordinary spirit was in him. He had an extraordinary spirit. It was in him, and the king thought of giving him authority over the entire kingdom. Therefore, the supervisors and staff tried to find ground to accusation against Daniel as regard the administration. So what the others were interested, they were so jealousy of him because they wanted now to look forward in every day-to-day life. People will want to seek what you have and even want to damage your reputation. But what Daniel did, Let's see what gave him his extraordinary spirit. He had a very extraordinary spirit, and he did exemplary things, and he had exemplary behavior. Therefore, the supervisors have tried to find grounds for accusation against Daniel as regard the administration, but they could accuse him of no wrongdoing. So you can imagine, despite he had an extraordinary spirit, he was exemplifying his work ethics of high standard. So these others were trying to find something they could put on him because he was trustworthy. No fault of neglect or misconduct was to be found in him. He was a man of trustworthy, and no fault of misconduct was found in him. You think of misconduct and fault. Because he was trustworthy and no fault of neglect, misconduct was to be found in him. Then these men said to themselves, we shall find no ground for accusation against him, this Daniel, unless by the way of the law of his God. So now they targeted the weakness. You think the devil is an accuser of God's people. And what does he do? He looks for something that if he has failed to find fault in you, he will try to find something that he will attack. So it was only of his God. Let's see what happens. So these supervisors and saps went through to the king and saying to him, King Darius, live forever. All the supervisors of the kingdom, the prefects, saps, nobles, and governors had agreed that the following prohibition ought to be put into force by the loyal decree. Now they are going to accuse him by decree. So they have all agreed by acclamation. They have agreed that they are going to do something so that they can trap him, so that he can be accused by the decree or by law. So that's the law of the land. No one is addressing any petition to God or man for their for 30 days except you. So now they want to limit that now nobody should seek God, nobody should pray to God, so that in 30 days they will trap Daniel, because Daniel was a man of prayer, man of discipline, man of extraordinary purity, man of extraordinary spirit. So if they could do this, Daniel will be trapped in darkness and they will get him. That is by decree, by a force of decree. O king, otherwise he shall be cast into the den of fire. So now they have plotted a case, an evil way of taking him down. So your enemies try all things. When they fail, they'll find a solution which is in their best interest, not in the best interest of you and your God. Think about it. That's what happened to this great man. Now, O king, issue the provision over your signature, immutable and irrevocable, under the mad and the patient law. So they are looking, think of the United States, and they find a law that a decree, that under such a decree, if you go contrary such a decree, you will be accused of violation of the law. And that they have already had is like in the court, the penal code. They say that this is what will happen if you committed such a violation of that decree. You'll be hanged to death. You'll be put to death. So they have already made a plan against this great man. So the king Dara signed the prohibition and made it into law. Now it becomes a law of the land. Even after Daniel heard that this law had been signed, he continued his custom of going home to kneel in prayer and give thanks to his God in the upper chamber 3 times a day with the window open towards Jerusalem. So Daniel was a man of discipline. Not only was with exemplary, extraordinary spirit, he was a man of discipline in whatever he did. His God, he didn't put him. He was a man of his own character. He would go and pray. He had a discipline that he had to pray 3 times a day after his work, and then he would pray fencing Jerusalem. He had his door open and he was fencing Jerusalem. So that is one thing that we as human person we need in our daily life. So that in all things that we seek, God our God would lift us above other humans. So think about that practically. Whenever we are, whether you are in a foreign land, whether you are somewhere, your faith doesn't die. Just you only go to church, that is all. That's where people will see your God. Your God, you must exemplify Him every day. You must build such a capacity, such a spirit. So I encourage you in your daily to do, whether you are coming from work, have that discipline in your life and go in your heels and pray to the living God. He did that. He exemplified his that. So that made him somebody extraordinarily of his time. Think of this man and think of yourself. I want to be a man of my time. What exemplifies you? It's your abilities to do certain things beyond other people. That's what this Daniel was doing. So this man rushed in and found Daniel praying and pleading before his God. Then they went to remind the king about the provision. Did you not decree, O king, that there is no one to address a petition to God or a man for 30 days except you, O king? Otherwise, we shall be cast into the den of lions. The king answered to them, the decree is absolute, irrevocable under the Medes and Persian law. So now they have found something. They have virtued because they had plotted it, and that was the intent, the evil intent against this great man of God. You can imagine our people, when we go beyond and above, what happens to us. To this, the reply. Daniel the Jews exile has paid no attention to you, O king, or to the degree you issued. These times, 3 times a day, Jehovah's prayer. So what they were fighting is the ability for him not to pray to God, the ability to him not to pay petition to God. So you imagine you are an exile. Do not be dismayed. You are a foreigner, you are an exile, you are not in your land, and do not be afraid. This is who we worship. We don't abandon our God. We don't abandon our faith. We must exemplify. So I urge you, my brethren, wherever you are in the planet Earth, remember the story. And this is a story for you and me. That whenever we are, we should exemplify our time. Like Daniel, do not be afraid of the things that you see. Do not be afraid of what can be plotted against you. If you glorify the living God, indeed He will respond in kind, less as we are going to see how God rescued Daniel. The king was deeply grieved at this news and made up his mind to save Daniel. He worked until sunset to rescue him, but this man insisted, keep in mind, O king, they say, that under the maze and patient law, every law, provision, or decree is required. So now they found and they trapped even the king himself, so that the king can sign and decree, and himself he cannot be able to halt it. It is the law of the land. Think of the law of the land. Think of the law of the land. And that's the decree of the land. And no person, no human person can revoke or change such a law. So the king ordered Daniel to be brought and cast into the lions. To, to Daniel he said, may your God whom you serve so consistently save you. So what do we see? What is the main character of this great man? Daniel is consistent in prayer, is consistent in his God. It's like when you wake up, you think about God. When you go to sleep, you think about God. You pray, you speak the word. That is consistent with the law. He was a man of exemplary behavior. He was a man consistent with prayer. That is an example of what we ought to do whenever we are, so that we can show others that not only are we afraid to suffer for what we believe, our conviction, our faith, and our beliefs, we should exemplify beyond measure and reason. To the first straw, any trembling, the king sealed with his own ring and the rings of the lords, the stone that had been brought to lock the opening of heaven. Now the king even seals to make sure nobody will touch that. So now you have been sealed, you have been rocked to no man's land, so that you don't come out. Let's see what extraordinary God does for the sake of this man. Then the king returned to his palace for the night. He refused to eat and dismissed the detainer, since sleep was impossible for him. The king rose very early the next morning and hastened to the lion's den. As he drew near, he cried out to Daniel, sorrowfully, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has the God who you serve so consistently been able to save you from the lion? Even the king is crying. Sorrow, to be sorrowful means you are feeling pity. To this, what action has been done to an innocent person? O Daniel, servant of the living God, as the God whom you serve so constantly been able to serve you to save you from the lions? Daniel answered the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and closed the lion's mouth, so that they have not hurt me. For lion's mouth, so that they have not, I have been found innocent before him. Neither to you have done any harm. So he even acknowledged that the king did not do any harm. Neither the living God did not find any harm against. So your enemies may plot anything they want to do against such of your life. But if you have faith and the spirit of Daniel, guess what? You are innocent before God and men. My God has sent his angels. I have been found innocent before him, neither to you have I done any harm, O king. This gave the king great joy. At his order, Daniel was removed from the den and had because he trusted in his God. The king then ordered the men who had accused Daniel, along with their children and their wives, to be cast into the lions of den. Before they reached the bottom of the den, the lion overpowered them and crushed all their bones. So you can imagine the enemies had plotted. Now, whatever plot they had plotted against Daniel, now it became their plot. And they were thrown the same place and they even never reached down or eaten by the lions. So you can imagine the extraordinary power, the extraordinary example, the consistency that we see in this great man in exemplifying his duties and his life. The king Darius wrote to the nations and the people of every tongue, wherever they dwell on earth, all peace to you. I decree that throughout my loyal domain, the God of Daniel is to be reverenced and feared. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be without end. He is a deliverer and a savior, working signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, and he delivered Daniel from the lion's power. So Daniel fared well during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus and Patience. So you can imagine, one of the greatest things that we have learned is this character that Daniel. He had extraordinary spirit. Number one. Number two, he was a man of trustworthy, and no long, no fault was found on him. Except now, these people, your enemies may try to find something within the law. Now they plotted something which would trap Daniel and even the king himself, so that the king would have no such authority to prevent what was going to take place. Daniel was a man of discipline, a man of prayer. He prayed 3 times after his work. He would go home in the upper chamber. He opened the door and he was fencing Jerusalem and he was praying 3 times. He was consistent in praying to God. He was consistent, extraordinary abilities, was a man of prayer and a man of discipline. He was not a man who was afraid even to die for the cause of his God, what he believed. He had conviction. He had faith beyond reason and doubt. And you can imagine the same God whom he feared and revered saved him. So every day in our life, we must possess such a disciplinary act of truth. Be trustworthy in your jobs, in your ministry, whether you're a preacher, whether you're a teacher, and exemplify whatever things to do. Most people read this book, the beautiful book of Daniel, and they admire certain section. But this is the most beautiful aspect of this great prophet. You think of what he did. We must be interested in the personality, what he did that made him extraordinary. That is what we need ought to look at. He had extraordinary spirit. He was consistent in prayer. He was a man of prayer. He prayed 3 times after his work. He was not found of any fault, and he feared God to the extent of him being prosecuted. So that is what I urge you, my brethren, to live in faith, in discipline, and be consistent in what you do in your daily life. Indeed, like our time, this time we live, I hope that our God would exemplify the times that we live if we take such a persona of this great man. Even in the whole land of nations, a decree would be written, and our God would be honored in heaven and earth. Brother, may God be with you, and may you take that extraordinary spirit of God with you and with your family. In Jesus Christ, I pray now, Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.